Hi, everybody. Welcome to ABC News Live. I'm Whit Johnson. We're following the biggest stories happening around the world, talking to correspondents on the ground, watching those stories develop, including President Trump in the UK today, meeting with the Prime Minister, Theresa May. They just wrapped up a press conference a short while ago. A lot of news to unpack there. All of that happening as thousands take to the streets in the UK protesting the president's arrival. Also, a lot of anger and discussion over the president's explosive summit with NATO leaders a few days earlier. We'll get to all of that in just a moment. First, check your day's top headlines.
Former FBI lawyer Lisa Page, who traded anti-Trump text messages with an FBI agent, is expected to testify behind closed doors at a House Judiciary Committee hearing today.
63 years after he was brutally mutilated and murdered, the case of Emmett Till, a young African-American Chicago teen, is again in the hands of federal investigators. The investigation into the Till murder has been reopened based on the discovery of new information.
FEMA now admits it was underprepared for last year's hurricane season and drastically underestimated just how bad Hurricane Maria would be for Puerto Rico. If your morning is starting with the cereal Honey Smacks, the advice today is to toss them. The CDC now says a salmonella outbreak linked to the cereal has made at least 100 people sick across 33 states. Johnson & Johnson has been ordered to pay over $4.5 billion to 22 women who charged the company with selling baby powder contaminated with asbestos. And then there was one, Blockbuster. The video store chain had been down to 3 locations, but the 2 left in Alaska are ending rentals on Sunday and will start selling everything off. That will leave just one Blockbuster in Bend, Oregon.
All right, let's get back to the big story of the morning. President Trump in the United Kingdom right now. He's been meeting with Prime Minister Theresa May. Let's go to our Karen Travers, who is live in London for us. And Karen, there is a lot of news to discuss from this press conference, the two of them. But one of the topics we wanted to touch on first, the president heavily criticized Theresa May regarding her Brexit negotiations with the European Union in a British tabloid. And yet in the press conference today, they seemed friendly, and the president seemed to walk back those comments a little bit.
He did, Whit. They were holding hands when they came into the press conference, the president and the prime minister holding hands briefly as they left the press conference. I mean, they were going to great lengths to show that their relationship is strong. The president, in fact, was saying that he wasn't being critical of Theresa May. He wasn't criticizing her personally in that bombshell interview he did with the Sun tabloid newspaper here yesterday. In that interview, he said that he had spoken to Theresa May about Brexit, that plan for the United Kingdom, of course, to leave the European Union. And he gave her advice on it, but she didn't listen to him, and he disagrees with the plan that she's taking to go forward. The president threatened or predicted that if Britain continues on this path that she's taking them on, then the United States might not be able to move forward on a trade deal. Well, when the president was standing with the British Prime Minister today, it was all smiles. It was a very deliberate attempt to show a lack of tension. He said that the relationship between the United States and the United Kingdom is at the very highest level, that special relationship. And he says he thinks that Theresa May is a fantastic woman. She's doing a tremendous job.
And he also, when asked that question about the so-called advice that he gave, he called it more of a suggestion, but wouldn't get into or elaborate on exactly what he said to her. I do want to touch on another topic, though, because the president talked about his upcoming summit, the big meeting with Vladimir Putin. What specifically did the president say he would discuss with the Russian leader?
The president said that he will talk about Ukraine, Syria, the Middle East, other security issues, and of course, Russia's election meddling will come up. He was asked as he was walking out of that press conference whether he would tell Russia to stop meddling in elections, and he said simply yes. But the president also seems to be, I think, going to a great length to downplay expectations for this meeting. Yesterday, he said it was going to be a loose schedule. The White House has said there isn't going to be some big signing statement or big action taken out of it. And the president said today he's also not expecting that when they talk about Russia's election meddling that Putin's going to say, yeah, we did it. He made sort of a joke that maybe is dated to some people, but he said there isn't going to be a Perry Mason moment where Putin is just going to confess to everything. But another indication from the president that he is going to talk about it. He just hasn't talked about it in such strong terms, I think, as some of his aides have said, who say he's really going to push Putin hard.
Yeah, and the president's time in the UK, it's not finished. He still has a busy day ahead. He's having tea with the Queen. What can you tell us about that meeting later today?
Oh, to be a fly on the wall for what is the social part of the president's visit. He and the First Lady will be sitting down for tea with Queen Elizabeth, and royal experts have told ABC that she's going to go to great lengths to make them feel comfortable, to put them at ease. Her famous dogs will be there, of course, and that's usually a very good icebreaker for any guests who are coming in and meeting the Queen for the first time. We're also told, Whit, she's going to pour and serve the tea herself. The president clearly seems to be very pleased with this meeting. He told the Sun newspaper that he thinks the Queen is impressive and tremendous, and he's very excited to take the First Lady to meet her.
Yep, the president calling his relationship with the UK the highest level of special, describing that. All right, Karen Travers for us live in London. Thank you so much. For more of our coverage of the president's trip to the UK, we're also following the protests. Thousands of people hitting the streets. There you can see some of the images now. Our Ian Panel has been walking and following along, talking to these protesters for hours now. Ian, we were able to get you up live in a signal. We know we were having some signal issues there. It's good to see you. What can you tell us about what the protesters are saying? How are they reacting to the president's visit to the UK?
Yeah, that's right. We've been following them certainly for hours, if not days. You know that little monitor on your phone that tells you how many steps you've done? I guarantee it's in the tens of thousands. Talking of tens of thousands, there are tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of people have come out onto the streets of London today. London is a city that sees lots of protests. It's rare to see something quite this size. People from all sorts of backgrounds, not just Brits, not just Londoners. I've seen many Americans here today. They're all united in one very simple message, that they don't think that President Trump is welcome in the country, and they don't like his policies. In particular, it's his policies on immigration that seem to have united quite so many people against him. Now, there are people of all different kinds of backgrounds, and they're against different parts of different policies, but there is that sense of not just disliking the president and his policies, but that sense of fear. That fear about the unpredictable element of Donald Trump and what it is that he's capable of doing. So we're on Regent Street. You can see the police are here. Pretty relaxed party, carnival type atmosphere. We've been stood in this spot, I think, probably for 45 minutes, and it just has not stopped moving by. So they're all heading down to Trafalgar Square. You know, it's where you've got the large column of Nelson's column in the centre square. They're going to go there, they're going to hold a rally, there are going to be some speeches, and people are trying to make their voices heard. There was some question, right, about whether President Trump was aware of this, whether he'd hear or see it. Well, he certainly won't hear or see it directly, but he probably will do on the news. And for a man who spends quite so much attention on Twitter, he's bound to see it there as well. And in his interview with The Sun, interestingly, he betrayed for the first time some sensitivity to the fact that he was aware that people here did not want him in central London, and that he was responding to that.
You mentioned the interview in The Sun, the British tabloid there. I know if you're having difficulty hearing me, I'm going to just try to speak a little bit louder for you, Ian. How are people reacting to the president's criticism of the British Prime Minister in The Sun?
Look, I think for a lot of people here, it won't necessarily come as a surprise. It breaks all sorts of political, diplomatic decorum, right? If you are the guest in someone's country, you don't give an interview to... It's not just the main tabloid news, but it is the most widely read newspaper in Britain. You don't give an interview to its political editor criticising your host, and that's what he did. So there is that British sense of decency that even if they don't like Theresa May, and many of the people here will not be fans of Theresa May or her Conservative government, they will feel some sense of affront that this is not how things are done. But these people are no fans of Brexit, or most of them will not be fans of Brexit. That was the decision to pull Britain out of the European Union. So there will be an element of not being so surprised that the president is being outspoken and being slightly offended that this is how you behave when you're the guest in someone's country. whether you can hear, we've also got kind of police helicopters flying overhead as the crowd kind of keeps on coming by. Union movements are represented, gay, lesbian groups are represented, seen school groups, seen bands, really great atmosphere here, but also representative, I think, of a lot of anger towards President Trump. This isn't unusual. I mean, when George W. Bush came, when President Obama came, even when Richard Nixon came as president, there's always a reaction from the British public. Now you hear that roar that's coming up? That's because of the helicopter. So every time the police helicopter goes overhead, the crowd starts to roar to try and drown out the sound. And that gives you some sense of the mood here.
Hello, Donny, you fascist.
All right, Ian Panel, you know, we're going to wrap that up. Always some characters out there when it comes to doing a live protest and stuff like this. Our thanks to Ian Panel and the crew out there following all the developments. We do want to transition to another story, and this was the huge story coming out of the weekend and starting this week. That is the rescue of that Thai soccer team in the caves. All 12 boys and their soccer coach making it out alive. It was an extraordinary international effort that played out over many hours. Our correspondent Adrian Bankert has been out there for days following all of this. Adrian, you've been at the hospital, which is where a lot of the activity has been lately. We know the boys are staying there in the hospital behind us. What can you tell us about their conditions today?
Well, thankfully, Whit, and a good evening to you from Thailand. The boys are steadily improving. In fact, doctors have been keeping us in the know about their conditions. Of the last group that came in, which was the last 4 boys on the soccer team and their coach, 3 of the boys reportedly have some sort of inner ear infection as well as ringing in the ears, but they are being medicated for that. The first 2 groups of boys really have done well. They're both eating normal food. So the first 8 boys eating normally. A couple of them have had some low fever, but overall their infection tests, the test to see if they have any highly contagious diseases, came back clear. They're still awaiting some tests about any viruses the boys may have contracted when they were inside that cave. But they're certainly building their strength back. If you remember, of course, we've been reporting this story. James Longman and Matt Gutman have been doing an awesome job about the time that the boys were discovered by divers and then the process of getting them out. But in that time period, they went so many days without food. Then they were given military rations, athletic gel, the kind of gel that you would ingest if you were about to run a race, you needed a boost of energy, but no real hard, solid food, nothing really substantial because of the length of time that they had been starving inside that cave. And so it's good to hear that they're off of that kind of a diet. They're off of soft food. And for the most part, they can have their favorite food soon. But we do know that their family is now able to be at their bedside, something that has been changed as of late. Before, they were just looking at them through a glass wall, but now relatives can indeed visit those children at their bedside, though they still have to wear surgical masks just as a precaution. If they are exposed to any germs or bacteria, then doctors want to prevent that. So we're happy to tell you that things are getting better very quickly.
Absolutely positive developments. I remember you reporting about that glass wall, and I'm a parent myself, and just imagining these parents who waited in agony for more than 2 weeks to hear news, and then for their children to come out, and then they weren't even able to go grab them, hug them, and kiss them right away. It's so great to hear that they're actually at their bedside. Do we have an update on when they'll be released from the hospital? Is there a timeline yet?
Well, the doctors have told us, even as recently as today, that they will have to be administered antibiotics over the course of the next few days. If you remember, the first boys were rescued on Sunday evening, Thailand time, which would be morning in the United States. And then the next boys came out on Monday, and on Tuesday we had the last 4 boys and the coach. So we still aren't certain yet whether they're going to stagger their release or release them all around the same time, but doctors are insistent that it will be at least a week inside the hospital receiving those antibiotics before they are allowed to go home. And when they do arrive home, they'll be monitored for the next 30 days to recover, to rest, and that means, too, that they won't have as much homework. The principal at one of the schools where many of the boys attend says that they will be given a pass on some of the scheduled exams that a lot of the students will be taking. But those students, those fellow students, have been praying first that they would be found and get out safely, and now they're praying in gratitude that they've been rescued. So we know that those boys could be out really anytime early this coming week.
Amazing. We can't wait for that moment. And while you were talking, we were just showing some of the images of those boys in their hospital beds, waving to the cameras. It is just, it warms your heart to see that. There they are right there with their hands raised, looking at these pictures. It's just unbelievable. The feel-good story of the year, absolutely. And Adrian, thank you so much for your incredible reporting and the entire team out there. I know it's been around the clock, but we've truly appreciated all of the stories and all the images you've been bringing to us. Thank you. All right, let's talk about some other stories that we're following and wild weather across the country. We have heavy rains. We have flash floods happening in different regions of the U.S. Let's get a check of the forecast with our chief meteorologist, Ginger Z. Ginger.
Whit, thank you. Let me take you straight into the weather headlines. A lot of flash flooding to talk about around the country, and for different reasons. We start in the west, where we see the pictures coming out of near San Bernardino, California. Those streets filled with mud. It really only took 1 inch to 2 inches in this region to get that car stuck in the mud. In Utah, it was up to 3 inches near a burn scar, and that's why you see that really muddy water rushing down the hills. And then finally, I wanted to bring you a picture from Minnesota where up to 7 inches of rain fell. Completely different systems and different mechanisms. However, same result. You see that water submerging a car. Now, that two highs placed perfectly to give us more potential for flooding. That's why you see flash flood watches from Nevada to New Mexico and Colorado in the southwest. A lot of that moisture initiating and coming off of the Pacific. But then the perfect setup with certain fronts and a high pressure you saw kind of building there. In Des Moines could see 3 to 4 inches right down into Alabama and Georgia, where a front will stall this weekend. So keep an eye on all of that, and squeezed in the middle will be heat. And also on the west coast, look at that. A heat advisory stretches from northern Illinois back through parts of Arkansas and Louisiana. So you'll see heat indices there close to 105 in some places, or even a little bit higher. And then the excessive heat warning from Redding up through Medford. Look at even the Cascades have that red flag warning because of all the heat and dry there. But some of the numbers will be 10 to even 20 degrees above average this weekend. Whit?
All right, Ginger, thanks so much. And with the high heat, triple digits in some places, people will be rushing to the beaches to try to cool off. Let's get to our Victor Oquendo, who's live in Miami. But Victor, though, there are some hazards people need to consider. First, though, I want you to talk about this incredible story. Speaking of those hazards with the currents and everything, this teenager who was basically lost at sea out there for 10 days. What can you tell us about that?
10 hours, Whit. 10 long hours all alone in the middle of the night. He says that he survived by praying to God the entire time, and somehow he did it while holding on to his glasses the entire time. Much more on him, this teenager, a 19-year-old, in just a moment. But first, it's been a very active week for rip currents. Hundreds of rescues up and down the East Coast all week long. This year alone, 16 people have died because of rip currents. One of those just north of here in Volusia County, Florida. A 61-year-old man was swept away by a rip current. He did not survive. But this teenager that we mentioned earlier, 19-year-old Blake Spatero, he was just in waist-deep water, not that far out at all, when a rip current came and took him out. He immediately started screaming for help, but nobody could hear him. He got carried out so far that eventually his father and the Coast Guard started searching for him. He was out there all alone for 10 long hours. He says that when he got really tired, all he did was float on his back, and that's actually exactly what lifeguards say you should do if you just get too tired while trying to fight one of these rip currents. What you should do, by the way, is try to swim parallel to shore, but if that gets too tiring, simply float. It's an easy maneuver that could save your life. So Spatero, this 19-year-old, he somehow drifted about 4 miles, eventually making it to a golf course. That's where he came ashore, and that's where he got the help that he so desperately needed. An incredible story of survival. So when it comes to spotting these rip currents that can be so dangerous, there are a few things you can do. First thing is just get to an elevated spot on the beach. You don't need to go that high up. Just take a look at where those people are up there. That's high enough. Here on South Beach, we also have this pier over here. You can walk up to those rocks as well. You want to give yourself a good vantage point and see where the tide is coming in. So once you see the tide, you start to see it all, the waves coming in, kind of look for a break, some kind of gap in those waves. Right in the middle, you might see just that current. You'll be able to spot it. Also want to look out for foam or seaweed accumulating out there. But honestly, the easiest thing to do, just ask a lifeguard if there are rip currents. The safest thing to do is just swim at a beach where a lifeguard is present. But there is one more thing to keep in mind, Whit. If you're in the water and you can't see the lifeguard, chances are they can't see you. Whit?
All great advice, and thanks for the correction there. 10 hours, significantly different than 10 days. I misspoke on that. But it doesn't seem, Victor, it doesn't seem like it's stopping people, the rip currents, from going out into the water. What are people telling you there on the beach?
Well, look, a lot of people here are on summer break. Honestly, it's South Beach, so the weather's kind of always like this, as you can imagine. It's just after 11 a.m. and the beach is already slammed out here. They're taking full advantage. Right now, thankfully, the water is calm, but because of Hurricane Chris right along the East Coast all week long, the water's got really rough out there, so it was definitely a busy week for lifeguards. Beaches were closed in some areas as well, and for good reason, because those rip currents, sometimes you really do not want to take any chances out there.
Absolutely. I got to admit, I'm a bit jealous of your remote location, though, right now. The beach, more comfortable than the studio, I think, heading into the weekend. Victor OQUENDO in Miami, thanks so much. We appreciate it. All right, and for more on that story and all the stories that we're following here at ABC News, you can go to abcnews.com or download the ABC News mobile app for breaking news alerts straight to your smartphone. We'll have the latest developments on all the breaking stories happening here today on ABC News Live. I'm Whit Johnson. Have a great day.